Um, your thought on the Manafort, it's now in the hands of a jury. People are trying to extrapolate, all right, what will this decision mean? And multifaceted, multi-counts, I grant you. But what seems to be crucial in Manafort is, business ties, connections, many of them to Russia. But if you're the President of the United States, what are you looking to see out of this?
I don't know. I mean, I think, to me, this prosecution always struck me as one that you could justify independent of all of the political swirl and firestorm around it, that, in the ordinary course, this would be something that the Department of Justice would be paying attention to. And so I understand that it has implications insofar as it, raises the question about whether or not Paul Manafort, at the end of all of this, in the event of a conviction, decides to cooperate. But, I mean, I think, juries understand lying, cheating, and stealing. And, not paying taxes with regard to income derived overseas that was concealed is a problem, if that's in fact what happened.
But would he have gotten that scrutiny if he had not briefly been the chair of the Trump campaign?
Well, look, you can always make that argument. But there's no question, at least in my view, that independent of all of that, however it is that we came to have this prosecution, that the prosecution, at least from what I was able to follow based upon the evidence that was admitted at trial, seemed warranted and seemed like a prosecution that should have been brought.
So when things veer off course, as they always do, you were dealing with that with the Clinton investigation, it's veered into business tie-ins and transactions.
Right.
And I'm wondering if that is where you think it ultimately goes.
Well, I do, because I don't think at the end of the day that we're likely to see a provable case in court of collusion that involves the upper reaches of the Trump campaign.
Could you define what you think collusion is?
I mean, what I think it is, although you don't really hear much about this in the media, is an effort by the Trump campaign to communicate and coordinate with Russian government officials and make promises once they took office in exchange for information that would help them in the campaign. I don't think that ever happened, because I think at the relevant time when these matters would have been discussed, even the Trump campaign didn't believe that it was going to be elected. So it didn't really have anything to trade in July of 2016 or June or July of 2016, because even they didn't think they were going to be able to be successful against Hillary Clinton in the fall. So, I mean, that's the kind of collusion I would understand would really constitute a case that would warrant criminal prosecution, a conspiracy to trade favors in exchange for beneficial information from the Russians in order to affect the outcome of the election. So far, tell me if I'm wrong, I have not seen any evidence to suggest that that in fact occurred.
Real quickly on this, my producer's going to kill me on this. I did want to get your take on this cabinet spray meeting yesterday. You might or might not have seen.
Yes.
But when we were on it, it was interesting that the president turned to Jeff Sessions as Attorney General on this opioid side and said, I want you to sue these guys. I'm paraphrasing here.
Right.
To go after them. What did you make of that? Is that typical? Can a president?
Well, I heard your lead, and I didn't think that was so unusual.
Really?
The president, he's the head of the executive branch.
So he can call on his attorney general. I want you to sue these guys.
He sets in broad strokes what he thinks the interests of the executive branch are, and then, says to the attorney general, I want you to look into this. Now, you can talk about whether that's artfully done or whatever, but it's certainly the president's prerogative to say, I am very concerned as an elected official on behalf of all of the American people with regard to whether or not the federal government is doing all that it should be doing relative to holding drug companies accountable, fentanyl makers, oxycodone makers, with regard to whether there's a federal interest there. Clearly there is. It's regulated by the FDA. Should a federal lawsuit be brought? And he says to his attorney general, who's the chief law enforcement officer of the country and is in control on behalf of the interests of the United States in court, do you think, and I want you to look into whether or not cases, civil litigation can be brought. I think that's entirely inappropriate.
And Sessions seemed to indicate we're already there.
Well, they're certainly already there. I think they filed a statement of interest in the pending litigation involving states and cities in the Northern District of Ohio. I imagine there's going to be a federal presence there, as there probably should. And then it will be up, to courts to decide what to make of all of that. So, that's an appropriate role for the president.
Then I'm
of the United States
reassured.
to play.
If you say it's okay, then it's okay. Jeff Sessions is still in his job. Are you surprised?
I think he has somewhat of an insurance plan through all of this.
I think you're right.
I think it's in the country's interest that he remain. I think this investigation through Mueller and the special counsel needs to be seen through to its conclusion, but I do think the clock is running, and I think it needs to be wrapped up, if it can be, in short order, meaning possibly before the midterm elections, but if not then, very shortly thereafter.
The likelihood of the president talking to Mueller is what right now?
I think it's slim to none is the sense that I'm getting, and that is a surprise to me. I would have thought, earlier on in the investigation, the president might well try to offer that, which he seemed to do, in an effort to try to bring the
September 1st deadline, what do you make of that?
I think that's, probably a real one. I think that's probably a real one.
Okay, Robert Ray, we hit you with a lot of stuff today. Flawless as always. Thank you very, very much.